Hi, we're here with Leah Belsky. She's Chief Enterprise Officer at Coursera. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you as well, Florence.
So walk me through some of the things you're seeing on Coursera in terms of, the post, the COVID-19 developments and, basically just things you're seeing on your platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Well, as everyone knows, this COVID crisis has really changed the shape of education. UNESCO reported that as of March 12th, actually, there was over 1.6 billion students around the world who are now shut in their homes, unable to go to school, and most of the global universities have been shut down. And so it has resulted in a couple things. We as Coursera at that point, and so for those who don't know, what Coursera is a global online learning platform. We've got over 3,000 courses from the top universities and companies. And individual learners, primarily adult learners, come to the platform to advance their careers, to study in all sorts of topics, primarily business, technology, and data, but also in the social sciences and arts. And since the COVID crisis began, we've seen different things in different parts of the platforms. So on the consumer side, we've seen over 6x the amount of registrants and traffic from people rushing to the site to learn during this period. And if we look at the top things they've been studying, we see a number of actually the most popular course during this period has been a course called The Science of Well-Being. There's been over 1.5 million people who have enrolled in that course. And then we've seen a lot of enrollments in courses like machine learning, programming, learning how to learn, which is a course that helps people start in their journey in online learning. And on the university side, when the COVID crisis started, we got together with our partners and, we're really thinking, how can we actually help the university sector beyond putting out our consumer platform? So 6 months ago, we'd released a program called Coursera for Campus, which allows any university to take the Coursera catalog and deploy it on campus to their students. And so what we decided to do is launch what we're calling the Coursera Coronavirus Response Initiative. And we made that platform available for free to anyone, any university in the world that wants to deploy Coursera during this time. And the response has just been tremendous. We've received over 30,000 inquiries. There's over 8,000 programs deployed, over 1 million learning hours. So it's been a really interesting period.
Would you say this is online education's moment? I mean, we had a bunch of universities go online, schools are going online. I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic's definitely been video conferencing's moment. So I guess what's your take on, is this a turning point for online education, or I guess how do you see it in the long-term view?
I definitely think this is the turning point. I wouldn't say that this is the moment. If you speak to many of the universities, and we brought together many of our universities a week ago in a global conference, they will say, what we're putting out now is crisis education. This is not true online education. This is, whatever we could pull together in a few weeks. But I do think this crisis is going to profoundly change how universities educate people moving forward for a couple of reasons. One, students are now scattered around the world, and I think it's unlikely that they'll all come back to campus immediately. We've seen the predictions from the experts, and it sounds like we're going to see waves of this virus and waves of sheltering in place and then going about our daily lives. And from the university perspective, I think it's unlikely that many of the students who are now distributed around the world will all come together in the same place. And so universities are going to have to start designing their education so that part of it is forever online. And so that's the world that we are collaborating with our partners and collaborating with universities around the world to enable.
So do you think the new normal looks more like online or more like traditional, or we're headed for some hybrid sort of period?
I think it's much more online, and it also has hybrid. So the future that we're planning for, looks a little bit like this. I think you'll have many of the top universities that already have a lot of digital infrastructure combining, essentially enabling their professors to go online and teach courses online with their LMSs and on Zoom and on all these tools we see now. And then there'll be many other universities that are not in a position to enable their professors to teach and record video on directly. And instead, they decide to use courseware for other universities. And then their professors take on a slightly different role, which is facilitating classrooms, facilitating discussions both in person and online, but using courses and lectures for other universities. So that's kind of the world we're preparing for, and it's actually a radically different world from a higher education standpoint. It's different because so much of it is online, but it's also different because traditionally every university did its own teaching. Every university had its own professors, record the same lectures, even if that meant you were having thousands of people being taught Psychology 101 or thousands of people being taught Intro to Data Science. And I think in the new world, it's not feasible, nor is it necessarily the best solution for students to have every university repeating the same content. So I think the role of the professor is going to change. The amount of time students spend learning online is going to change. The way universities collaborate is going to change. And the COVID crisis is really accelerating all of this.
How do you see the cost structure at universities changing? Like, I mean, I'm an adjunct professor myself, and you know, you move online and you kind of see, you know, as a parent, you're sort of like, well, am I going to pay as much for that online experience or versus a physical experience? How do you see that shaking out over time?
You know, I think we don't know. You know, the early signs, at least in the US at least, we're seeing lots of universities report that they're expecting big deficits. They're expecting for their MBA programs or their master's programs for students not to come back because they don't want to pay for the online education. And some universities are actually lowering tuition. But I think over time, students are still going to pay for virtual education. You know, I think there's a lot of things about online education that are even more powerful and effective. You know, we run an online MBA program. And when we first launched that program, we had a lot of synchronous courses where all the students would join together on Zoom. And we surveyed students and we said, do you want more of this? And they said they'd actually like less. They valued the flexibility that the online program could provide. And the partner that we work on this online MBA program, University of Illinois, even closed their on-campus program because so many students just wanted to learn online. So I think online education, if done right, can be incredibly powerful. And, you know, it may be that the price point is slightly different. And, you know, we at Coursera make a point of trying to lower the cost of the education that we're providing so that it can be more affordable. But I have high hopes for how impactful it can be in terms of providing people job relevant skills, giving socialization, and expanding the number of people who can have access.
Which I guess that kind of brings me to my next question. What is missing from the online education experience today? And, you know, I mean, that can cover technology, that can cover, you know, how we interact. I mean, what, you know, if you were, you know, as part of Coursera, if you were to just draw this up and be like, here's my, you know, my Uber online education view, what would it be? What technologies, you know, what's missing, I guess?
I think, you know, what's missing from online education today is you have so many people trying to replicate an online experience as opposed to a few platforms which are extensible and allow people to add different content, allow people to add different tools. You know, so I'll give you an example. I just came from a product roadmap webinar from Coursera, and one of the most exciting developments is a feature called Coursera Labs, which allows any professor to actually bring in any other teaching tool or technology into the Coursera framework as they build their courses. And so it may be that you need to do a project with big data, and so you need a certain amount of compute capacity, or it may be that you want to do some type of online lab or some type of auto-graded coding assignment. There's a lot of tech tools that are needed that lots of small companies have been working on that not many people have access to. And I think, you know, what we'll see in the future is there's certain things that are really, really hard to teach online, and we'll see more sharing of how you teach those things and more sharing of the tools to teach those. So it's not only, you know, pockets of the world that get access to these higher quality experiences. I'll give you another example. A year ago, we acquired a company called Rhyme. And what it is it's an online software training tool. So it's a framework that allows you to create a virtual instance of some type of software, and you can teach someone to code or to train on that software, whether it be Zoom, whether it be Salesforce, and do projects. And they can complete those projects. And that was a real innovation because historically the way people were being taught software was, you know, they were getting on a Zoom and one person was actually taking them through, here's how to use it. But it's a very different learning just watching versus getting to be hands-on. And now that we have this Rhyme product, we've made it available to universities and authors all over the world who can help people learn software in a more powerful way. And so these are some of the newer things that are coming out and being built into online education. And what I'm excited about is that we're heading towards a world where more universities are opening up and looking at other types of teaching tools. Even you as an adjunct professor could use these tools. And I think that's going to enable us to take a great leap forward.
How do you see the online education developing for things like, things where you need labs, biology, chemistry, those sort of things? Like the current state of affairs, I think works well for, projects, coding, deliverables, things like that. But, when it comes to like blowing things up or dissecting something, it's a little more, I guess, rudimentary, so to speak. So what technologies or what do you see developing on that front?
So I don't think we have a great answer quite yet. There's definitely a lot of companies out there that are working on that type of online lab experience. And if you talk to the universities right now, many will say we're going to allow our general sciences and humanities students to leave campus, but we need to find a way for students to still come back to do their wet labs type of experiences. But if you look at the startup space, there's a lot of startups working to create online lab experiences using virtual reality, using kind of central spaces where people would go. And I saw a demo the other day of, training doctors to do some type of physical exam. So you actually put on a virtual headset and you actually have to do the exam. So I think we're early there, but there's certainly a lot of people working on that challenge. And it's, similar technologies that we've seen in the military, where you've seen like virtual experiences in military training on how to interact in different experiences. But we've got a ways to go. I think what we're going to see, though, is now that so many people can't come back to campus, or universities want to plan for a future where people can't be there, we're going to see a big advance in those types of technologies and ideas about how to do those virtually.
So if we fast forward, I mean, Coursera's claim to fame so far has been, a lot of upskilling, right? Like I'm in the field, I want to acquire a new skill. You're kind of the platform of choice in a lot of ways. How do you see that changing given, the pandemic and where online education's going? I mean, how do you see that shifting over time?
I think that reskilling is going to become even more important today. We, in addition to launching this Coursera for Campus initiative, last Friday, we launched something called the Coursera Workforce Recovery Initiative, realizing that, after we went through the wave of school closures and challenges on the health front and the initial disease responses, the next big challenge that disrupted us all is the rising unemployment. And so the Workforce Recovery Initiative represents an initiative to make Coursera available to any government that would like to provide it for free to their unemployed citizens. So basically anyone who's unemployed in the world can, in partnership with their government, get access to Coursera. And part of the reason why we did that is that what's happening in this moment, in addition to the layoffs, in addition to the shutdowns, is companies are also doubling down on digital transformation. They're doubling down on figuring out how they can use technology to automate a lot of what they were doing. I have a friend who runs a very large support operation at a bank. And all of a sudden she had to send all of her support agents home and think about, what else could they do using technology to automate some of those calls. And so as companies double down on digital transformation, it means that more people are going to need to, during this time, advance the skills that they have to work in the jobs that are going to, once this recovery takes place. And so that's a really big focus of ours, to make sure that as many people as possible can upskill in these core emerging fields, whether it be because their university can now have access to career relevant education, or whether because they, as someone who's a consumer or someone who's unemployed, now has access to Coursera.
My final question is, everybody learns differently, right? So, I mean, I've seen some kids who kind of take to the online thing and almost prefer it. And then I've seen others who look at the screen and then, oh, there's a butterfly. Like, you know what I mean? They just can't pay attention. How do you address those folks who, may not be suited for that online learning for, whatever reason? Is that Is that a platform problem? Is that a curriculum problem? Or is that more like a personal discipline sort of problem?
You know, it's a great question. And, I'm sitting here as a mother who just spent a morning trying to try out Khan Academy with my 4-year-old and get my son to do it as well. And the only way I finally got my son to do it is by saying like, hey, you realize we need to actually show your teacher that we've completed this lesson. And so, years ago when Coursera launched and we had only the consumer business, we would say that one of the challenges with the platform is, you had to be an autodidact. You had to be someone who was like really good and disciplined at learning on your own. Since then we invested a lot in all sorts of behavioral tools to get people to have nudges, to get them to be able to learn with other people, to build community. But I think the big thing is, a lot of people say, well, why are people going to continue going to universities if there's all this great learning online? And, the big thing I see is that institutions of learning, whether it be universities who are putting their students online or whether it be companies that are helping people learn, are still going to have a powerful role to play, because it's the institution that provides like the social and the cultural framework and incentives to help people to learn. And so, with my son, the only way I got him to actually dig in was not because he hated the online interface, but by saying later today, you're going to talk to your teacher. And so, I think online learning is hard for everyone, but there's going to be parts of the offline experience, which is, you need to get into the writing group with your friends, or you need to interact with your teacher, or you have a test coming up. There's going to be other facets of what used to motivate people offline that will also be brought into the online framework. And I think a lot of that is going to be enabling, ensuring that universities still play that primary function of recruiting students, motivating them, driving accountability, creating incentives, and bringing learners together into a community. And I have a lot of confidence that between the technology, the platforms like ours, and then all the institutions around the world, be it companies, governments, universities, nonprofits who are creating other types of social frameworks for people to be able to learn in, that with that combination will be able to serve a large, wide variety of people. But, again, what we see right now in this crisis, where everyone has to learn alone in their homes with their parents or their friends or by themselves, I don't think this is not what I envision when I think of the future of online education.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. That was very informative.
Great. Thanks a lot for having me. Take care.